No, indeed. Well, joining us is James Shugg, Senior Economist at Westbank Bank. A very good morning to you. Well, let's start with that first story. Quite a dramatic picture. We're beginning to become used to them, perhaps, of migrants crossing the Mediterranean, and that headline, thousands of migrants rescued at sea. Do you think that disaster that they had last week, in a way, was a game changer?
It can be, and in fact, there are parallels with Australia, which has a lot of immigrants coming in by sea. The question is, are they economic, or are they genuine refugees from regimes or war or what have you? And a lot of the boats go down, unfortunately, and it's a big issue in Australia. I note that the Hungarian president is saying that he is reluctant to support this because they are largely economic. A lot of Hungarian immigrants back in the 50s, after their uprisings, I think it'd be nice to look back to history to see that the rest of the world should really be helping these guys, regardless of what their starting point circumstances were. The risk then is that you create the moral hazard that you encourage more to try to make the journey, which is very dangerous. That
has been part of the debate. They have increased the funding for this particular operation, bringing it back to the levels that it was last year. But I suppose it depends just whether they'll be able to have the political will to actually make a change in migration policy.
And populist policy, the people necessarily do have that anti-immigration sort of bent, don't they, in many countries, unfortunately.
And that story has had an impact on the UK election to a degree. Definitely the immigration policies of the various parties that are vying to be
strikes to the heart
in government, yes, after May the 7th. Give us your take on how it's all going. Of course, this is the week when voters go to the polls in the UK.
Well, one thing that surprises us is the lack of volatility in sterling, the sterling exchange rate this time.
It has been a bit wobbly.
It did, certainly it's weakened, but it doesn't look that much different to the Scottish referendum issue, which we kind of knew would go one way, I think. Look, there's a lot more uncertainty here. I mean, no party will get an absolute majority. Probably you'd see Labor get up with possibly the SNP, and there's a possibility. The markets will be just as unhappy with that sort of result, I think, as they would be with no clear result and having to go back to the polls. I'm not saying that they'll be unhappy with it because of a fairly philosophical reason, just simply because they'll be uncertain how that could possibly work over a long time.
In the City of London, how on edge are traders, are bankers, are those your colleagues about this event this week?
There's so much going on with the Fed to tighten or not to tighten, the Chinese economic slowdown, the collapse in the oil price, the collapse in the iron ore price, Greece, Ukraine's firing up a bit. I mean, it hasn't got as much attention as I thought it would. That's that point I made at the start, that we're surprised that there isn't more volatility about the sterling exchange rate because of this.
Well, you mentioned one of the stories there. Let's move on to it. Also in the Wall Street Journal this morning, and that is about China. The IMF is close to declaring China's yuan fairly valued for the first time in more than a decade.
That's right. The Americans consistently argue that they're not letting their currency appreciate quickly enough. In other words, the US dollar is therefore too competitive, not competitive enough against the Chinese renminbi because it's a managed currency. But look, the Chinese economy is slowing, and they're opening it up more and more to international capital markets. They are doing the right things that a market economy, or an economy that wants to become more market-oriented, would be doing. And I think it's probably pretty much a fair call at the moment, given the situation that China's in.
Do you think they managed it well, China? Because it was a change that had to come eventually, wasn't it? Obviously, for China, it's been brilliant, the fact that they've had to, they've had this currency not set in stone entirely, but fairly...
They let it appreciate very, very gradually, and then they stop it appreciating when they think there's risk related to, for example, the...
We'd all have to do that, though, wouldn't we?
Well, that's right, when they think that the global growth story is slow, for example. They've really got to, at some point, bite the balls even more on capital inflows into the country. And I think the IMF giving them recognition that it's fair at the moment might be a bit of a quid pro quo. There could be more to try in other areas.
Well, let's move on to The Guardian. After 100 days of Syriza, Greece still on the edge of an abyss. You mentioned this as well, James, that Greece is one of the areas that traders are looking at, haven't got their eyes on the general election, but on China and Greece. So what about this? Another deadline, which we seem to hear about so
they keep
often.
Getting moved.
They do, the goalposts move, as they say.
It's pretty much June 30 now, I think, which is when the bailout funding gets suspended.
So what's the latest
June
one?
30,
June the 30th. I thought we were defaulting at the end of May, but hey, as you say, it's changing all the time.
A default doesn't mean that Greece has to leave the euro, by the way. I mean, the mandate of the government is basically we'll stay in the euro, but will be under much easier conditions, will ease austerity. That's just an impossible mandate, I think, to deliver. And the government's going to have to back down a lot more if this isn't going to turn very messy for Greece. The irony is that over the longer term, Greece leaving the euro could be a good thing, but it will be very painful over the first 5 years.
But in that first 100 days in office, when there is a new government, there's always this kind of, it's been 100 days, what has this new government achieved? In the case of Greece,
it's not a lot. They did introduce food stamps, I think, which was a unilateral decision to introduce measures not approved by the creditors. Yeah, that's the situation Greece is in at the moment. It's been done by bureaucrats in Brussels and Frankfurt, and that doesn't please.
And that particular story also mentions the suicides that happened in Greece as a result of this crisis. A lot of people are so very sorry as well. Let's move on to Ford.
Yeah, Ford binning its heart attack detecting car seat after wearables overtake its technology. Just too late. Good idea, but too late maybe.
It's like, you get the... But if that's the future of cars, high-tech gadgetry, you're basically reducing the structure, the frame of the car, and all the high-tech value added is rewarded to someone else. I mean, I can understand why Ford wanted to try and go it alone, but the likes of Google and all those other companies in Palo Alto and the Silicon Valley, I think, have
I mean, when you've got wearable tech, I guess you don't need the car to tell you much, do you? If you've got it on your wrists and wherever else.
Or else just contract out to these companies to put the gear into their cars. But as I say, you lose a lot of the value yourself.
Okay, last story, last few minutes. William, Kate on family to lead lives out of the spotlight. We are talking about the new princess, the new royal princess.
And probably new popularity for William as King of Australia down the track. Queen's very popular there, I've got to say. But Charles, not so much. There's no way that we would become a republic.
Sounds like this new princess, James, will be in the spotlight in Australia. Alice and Charlotte, two of the names that they're talking about.
I've not heard about Sally at all.
Not Sally just yet.
Just not even on the table.
James,
thank you, James.
Thank you very much. And apparently a gun salute happening later to honour this new royal princess.
A new arrival. Have a lovely day. We'll see you soon.
Bye-bye. Thank you.